Hello and welcome back to another episode of Sports Speak. I'm your host, Tanyon Loose.
I'm your co-host, Spencer Ripchik. So we took a week off last week, but now we're back with an episode I think we're both pretty excited for. Our first ever postseason special.
So yeah, a lot of the regular seasons are kind of winding down across collegiate athletics right now, and a lot of sports are kicking off their respective postseasons. So we're here to give you guys all you need to know about Penn State's postseason outlook and just the other teams around the Big Ten as we close out winter sports. So as we start all these off, however, we're going to do our favorite news of the week. So, Spencer, why don't you get us started this time?
Yeah, I'm going to go for an event that I attended. Penn State women's gymnastics upset Maryland. Coming into this weekend, Penn State only had one win on the whole season over Yale by 4 points, who apparently Yale is not very good. But this weekend went a little different as the Nittany Lions defended Rec Hall, taking down the Terrapins. It was neck and neck for most of the match, but Penn State saw success in the floor routine at the very end. Lauren Bridges and Bella Salciato posted 9.925s, which is out of 10, so it's pretty close to perfect. And Lauren Bridges led the way for the Blue and White, posting a career high 39.525 total in all four events. So yeah, they did pretty well this weekend. Impressive.
Well, yeah. Another Penn State team that has now beaten Yale, like you said, is Penn State men's lacrosse, which was quite the feat for Jeff Tambroni's team. So they were 0-5 in their last 5 matchups versus Yale and had lost 3 straight games coming into this matchup, but they took down number 5 Yale 10-6. So that was quite the feat for them. They went on a little bit of a 5-0 run early in the game to jump out to a big lead, which probably excited a lot of Penn State fans, but then as some people may have expected, the game was tied up by halftime, so Yale was certainly in the thing. But Penn State came out firing in the second half and took control of the game and kind of got the win somehow, some way. So they're back in the right side of the wins column there. And they were kind of led by Jeff Brenflick, who had a hat trick. He's a younger guy on the roster. So I think some of that team is starting to come together. Some of the younger guys are stepping up. So it could be quite the interesting season for this lacrosse team. It seems like some talent's there, but they just got to put things together.
Yeah, I have no idea how Penn State beat Yale. I covered them like a week ago, and they played some team, and I think it was Lafayette, and they got beat pretty bad by them. So yeah, I have no idea how they did that.
We'll see.
But as we head to our postseason segments now, we got the Big Ten basketball tournament is coming up. It's not set in stone yet, but we have our projected bracket up on the screen here, and we're going to go through game by game and fill out our bracket to see if it comes true at the end of the season. And things may shake up a little bit, but we're going to give it right now as we're filming this on Monday, and it doesn't come out until Sunday.
Yeah, we're not going to see any significant changes. There's 1 or 2 teams that have a game left. The biggest thing could be Purdue plays Wisconsin to see who gets that number 1 seed, so you could see a swap between those teams there depending on if Purdue gets the win or not. But I think we're just going to get right into things and start, I guess, the kind of the seeding games, if whatever you want to call them, the opening round games there with Minnesota versus Northwestern and Nebraska versus Maryland. I got Northwestern and Maryland moving on. I think the Maryland one is going to be pretty much a consensus pick. That team's playing pretty well right now, and Nebraska's been hovering around the bottom of the Big Ten for a long time now until they beat Penn State the other night, so who knows what happened there. But then Northwestern as well, I think that's kind of a toss-up between those 2 teams.
Yeah, I think I like Northwestern as well. I mean, I've seen both these teams play, Minnesota and Northwestern, and only Minnesota was able to beat Penn State. However, Minnesota's last game against Penn State was terrible. Golden Gophers did not look very good. And I like the duo of Boo Buie and Pete Nance. They look like they really performed pretty well over these past couple of games. So, yeah, I like them in that game. And then Maryland, I mean, they could be the dark horse in this year's tournament. The Terps just took down Ohio State, which is a pretty big win. And I feel like they have a lot of pieces on the team that just haven't clicked all season. However, the team's offense has been heating up with Fats Russell and Eric Ayala in the paint. So, yeah, I really like this team. And they could have a couple upsets down the road, maybe not.
Yeah, definitely possible.
Yeah. Who you got in Game 3?
I think looking at it, I guess we're going to say Indiana versus Michigan here. I like Michigan. They've had an up and down season. But, I mean, when you look at it, the talent's there for that team. And it's just a matter of are they going to put things together. So, I mean, I just think Hunter Dickinson's a force inside. They got a bunch of freshmen who are pretty good. I know they have Musa Diabate, he's good. They got guards who have experience, which I think is really vital to a team in postseason. So I like them to move on against Indiana. And then I think a lot of people are going to pick Iowa against Northwestern there. If Northwestern moves on, Iowa's playing pretty well right now. They got just a boatload of experience on that roster there. So I think they're definitely going to be favored. And then moving on to a game that a lot of Penn State fans will be interested in. Obviously, we got Penn State versus Rutgers, and I actually went for the upset here, surprisingly, after I went for Penn State moving on. And, I mean, they looked not very good against Nebraska the other night.
No.
But I know this Rutgers team has had its ups and downs. They were playing really well to start off February, but now they're on a 3-game losing streak. And Rutgers, like Penn State, is also just absolutely terrible away from home. I think they only have 3 wins on the whole season, and 2 of those wins are against Nebraska and Minnesota, who are at the very bottom of the Big Ten. So not exactly an ideal environment for Rutgers to be playing in away from their home court. So I think that'll definitely play into Penn State's advantage, who also, unfortunately, is not very good away from home. So it's kind of a matchup of bad versus bad right there. But I think Rutgers has been led by Ron Harper Jr. this year, who really just did not show up very much last year in the postseason. I think he had a pretty poor showing in the NCAA tournament. He shot the ball extremely poorly during that tournament appearance there. So I think that it's definitely possible for a Penn State team that has a lot of experience to get past this Rutgers squad. Will they be able to have success in the next round? I don't think so, but we'll get to there later. And then moving on to our last game, the second round, Maryland versus Michigan State. I'm taking Michigan State solely because they're coached by Tom Izzo, who is very, very good in March.
Yeah. So I kind of disagree with you on a couple of the March 10th games. I'm taking Indiana over Michigan, and Michigan's been up and down all season, probably the biggest bust of the season with where it was ranked coming into the season. A lot of people have had them at number 1.
I know.
This is going to be the first game back for Juwan Howard off of suspension, so it's going to be I think it's a real toss-up. And also, but the Hoosiers have one of the best players in the Big Ten in Trey Jackson Davis. So I feel like he'll do some damage, and I feel like if Michigan gets bounced in the first round, it would be the bow on a terrible season for the Wolverines. And
Absolutely.
then I'm taking Iowa, as you did as well. Iowa's one of the highest teams in the Big Ten right now with 20 wins on the season. Its offense is coming from its best player of the nation, Keegan Murray. Iowa's start to the season was a little rough, but in its last 3 games, Hawkeyes have wins over Ohio State and Michigan State, 2 really good teams. And then Penn State versus Rutgers. I chose Rutgers. Like a lot of teams in the Big Ten, Penn State has been up and down, like Michigan. However, Penn State has had a terrible showing in the past couple of weeks, especially with that loss against Nebraska. I mean, and these 2 teams met early in the season. They split. Penn State got the first game at home, and then Rutgers got the second game. And I think Rutgers down the stretch here has been playing really well, especially in February. I mean, like you said, they're led by Ron Harper Jr., And I also think Geo Baker can make a difference. And I think something that has been improved upon in this February has been Clifford Almoraru, who's been really good in the paint this season. So, yeah, I think they have the pieces that can take some names in the tournament. And then Maryland versus Michigan State, like similar to you, I have high praise. I had high praise on Maryland, but Michigan State is one thing Maryland can't replicate. That's Tom Izzo. So I think it's one of the best, not if the best, Big Ten coach of all time, so I don't think Michigan State gets bounced in the first round.
Yeah, I definitely agree there. I think what I might do for these last portion of the bracket here is I might go top half, bottom half, so maybe we'll both do our top half of the bracket here. So I have Michigan squaring off against Wisconsin. I think Wisconsin's going to get the win there. I mean, they have really experienced lineup there. I know they're one of the oldest players in the nation in Brad Davison, so he's certainly going to be a factor there. He played great in the NCAA tournament. I remember last year, especially, he had a huge game against North Carolina. I remember watching that one. So I think he shows up when this team needs him to, and obviously they have one of the leaders for Player of the Year in the country. So, I mean, I think they're going to move on. There's a reason they're the 1 seed right now on that bracket. And then the bottom half, I have Iowa against Ohio State. I have Ohio State moving on, actually. I like that team. I think that they really have a number of players who are capable of kind of going off. They're not really focused on 1 or 2 guys outside of E.J. Liddell. And I think they're just a pretty well-rounded team all around. And I know they really had a rough postseason last year, losing in the first round as a 2 seed there. So I think this is kind of going to be a redemption year for that team. And I think that if anything has shown us over the last season that you might as well just throw the regular season out the window when it comes to Big Ten basketball. So I'm okay with them losing 1 or 2 games down the stretch as long as they get things back together in the postseason, which they should have ample opportunity to. And then moving on to our semifinal matchup here, I have Ohio State beating Wisconsin. I think that there's going to be one team in the tournament that makes a little bit of a run this season, because it's Big Ten basketball after all, and crazy things happen all the time. So I think Ohio State's going to be that team, and I have them moving on to the championship game.
So I have, as you had Michigan, I have Indiana versus Wisconsin, and I have Wisconsin taking that. The Badgers have one of the most talented players in all of college basketball, like you said, in Johnny Davis, as well as Wisconsin has not lost to Indiana in their 2 meetings this season, so Wisconsin all the way. And then Ohio State versus Iowa, I think it's another toss-up, and off of recency bias, Iowa did beat Ohio State, and Ohio State has not looked good towards the end of the season with the loss to Maryland, like I said earlier. And this is one of my upsets this season, and I feel like Iowa moves on. So then we have Wisconsin versus Iowa, and Johnny Davis and Brad Davison. I don't think Keegan Murray can carry the team to the semifinals, so yeah.
It's respectable. All right, we'll move on to the bottom half now. So I have Penn State versus Purdue. And despite their somewhat close game earlier on in the season, that was a good one that I'm sad I wasn't at, but I don't think it's going to be close at all this time. I think this Purdue team is just ridiculously talented. I think that Penn State's kind of lack of size a little bit down low. I mean, it's tough guarding a guy like Zach Edey, who's, I think, is 7'4", something around those margins. It doesn't matter if you have a guy as big and strong as John Harrar is, when he can just reach over you and grab a board. But I mean, it's just the cycle of big men that they have as well. Travion Williams is also one of the best players in Big Ten. Jaden Ivey is arguably the best guard in the Big Ten, and they have just plenty of other guys who can shoot the ball, like Stasha Stefanovic. They just have one of the most complete teams in the nation. I think Purdue will be one of my picks to go pretty far in the NCAA tournament as well as the Big Ten tournament. And then moving on to the bottom half, I have Michigan State versus Illinois. I'm taking Michigan State here. I know they've been up and down, but I think Illinois has also just had some head-scratching losses across the last 2 seasons in general. I think just for whatever reason, this roster just gives up some questionable games once in a while, and I think this could be one of them. I think Michigan State always plays well in March. That's really the Tom Izzo trademark there that everyone's really come to know him by. So I think they move on, and then I have Purdue beating Michigan State, just because personally I think Purdue's the best team in the Big Ten, which we'll get to later, and I mean, they have the most talent, so I think they'll move on.
Yeah, I like that, but I have Purdue versus Rutgers in that round, and I have Purdue, like you said. I mean, it's just going to be a close one, I feel like. I feel like Rutgers they did beat them earlier in the season off that buzzer beater, but I feel like Purdue is one of the more complete teams in the Big Ten, and I think Purdue and Matt Painter get the job done, but in a close one. And then I have Illinois versus Michigan State, and Michigan State doesn't have what it takes to beat Kofi Cockburn and now Alfonso Plummer, who emerged in the win over Ohio State. Illinois is a more complete team like Purdue. And then I have Purdue versus Illinois in my chip, and I have Purdue versus Illinois. The Boilermakers are a more complete team with Jaden Ivey, Travion Williams, and Zach Edey. And Purdue and Illinois have played each other twice this year, and Purdue's won both, so I think Purdue wins again. And then for my championship, I have Purdue versus Wisconsin. I think this is it's going out on Tuesday, which is a day that these 2 teams play each other, which is tomorrow. Yeah. And then for the second meeting, I think that this will be a Big Ten championship preview tomorrow. So yeah, I think the winner of that game will win it all. But for this, I have Purdue winning it.
I'm going to concur with you there. I think Purdue is just the better team, although I have Purdue versus Ohio State. I think Purdue's the best team in the Big Ten from a talent standpoint. I think Matt Painter and coaches have been there, done that on a lot of occasions. They've made deep runs in the NCAA tournament before. They've made deep runs in the Big Ten tournament. I think this squad is pretty experienced, but they have playmakers on the offensive end, just really anywhere you look, whether it's penetration in the lane from Jaden Ivey. They got shooters on the outside. They got bigs inside. It's really a question of can they show up on the defensive end. And I think that they've had all season to prepare themselves in that standpoint, and I think they'll start to execute here, not come postseason time.
Yeah, I just think Purdue's the safest team to pick just with their depth. Absolutely. And how they played so far this season.
Yep. All right, well, now we're going to move on to my personal favorite topic here, and that is wrestling. Penn State is obviously the favorite heading into the Big Ten tournament, so we're going to break it down kind of weight class by weight class here and talk about our personal favorites for the championships at each weight class and Penn State as well. So before we get to my opinions, I'll let Spencer start us off, I think, with his input.
Yeah, I'm going to keep it simple for the people at home who don't know too much about wrestling like myself. And for weight classes 133, 141, 174, and 184, I'm taking all of Penn State's national champions. And then for 197, I like Max Dean. He's been solid all season. And I feel like this could be a turn of the tides for Penn State. And yeah, so we'll go back to 125. So you get it.
Yeah. Start a little bit of my personal monologue here.
Yeah.
So at 125, I think I like Nick Sirianno. I think he's really the consensus favorite for a national championship outside of maybe Patrick Glory from Princeton. But I think him and pretty much Drew Hildebrand are pretty much, it's close to a lock as you can find in the Big Ten tournament this year to meet in the final. I think they're pretty clear favorites at 125. And I think Sirianno proved that he's definitely the more dominant wrestler earlier on in the season in their matchup. So I think we could really see a repeat there. Again, of Sirianno taking the championship. At 133, I like RBY to get the win. I mean, this one's another one where a lot of people are going to predict that it's going to be him and DeSanto, Austin DeSanto of Iowa, meeting in the championship there. And really, Austin DeSanto gave him his closest match that he's had in a while in their dual meet in Iowa there. So I think that it's going to be close, but I think Roman Bravo Young gets it done again because he's got it done for the last how many times against DeSanto. He's really owned that matchup recently. Moving to 141, I think we could have a similar situation where a lot of people will kind of see Nick Lee and Jaden Ironman meeting up there. But I really think that this is going to be the year where Nick Lee certainly has the possibility to get caught. I mean, I'm predicting a Nick Lee versus Sebastian Rivera final. People could argue really that Sebastian Rivera is maybe top 3 for the Hodge Trophy right now for the best wrestler in college. I think that, I mean, he's just had a phenomenal season. Hasn't lost yet. He's had 15 tech falls or falls in the season, so he's been totally dominant from that standpoint, and 86% bonus rate. So when he's beating guys, he's beating them handily. And you could really argue that Sebastian Rivera deserves to be the 1 seed at this weight class, although I don't think he's wrestled either Nick Lee or Jaden Ironman. Whether you want to call that them dodging him or not, a lot of people have kind of debated that recently. I know Nick Lee had valid reasons for being out this season with his illnesses and whatnot. But I think this is going to be one of the most exciting weight classes to watch at the top, at least at 141. But I think I'm going to say Nick Lee gets it done. He's experienced. He's been there, done that at 141. But wow, this is going to be one I'm really excited to watch. Moving on to 149, I think Sammy Sasso is the clear favorite there. He's been really, really hard to take down this season. His defense has been phenomenal. He's always been known as a strong wrestler. At 149, he's only given up more than 4 points 5 times this season. And all but one of those times is when he's tech-falled his opponent. So he's pretty much only giving up over 4 points in escapes because he wants to get more points against his opponent. So that's just, it's huge, really. I think he's been phenomenal on both sides of the map, both offense and defense. And I think this is really a question mark from a Penn State standpoint. I think Bo Bartlett is the 7th seed, I believe, at 149. And he's really the biggest wild card for this Penn State team, I think. He's been like that all season. He's wrestled a number of close matches. I think Penn State's coaches would be very happy if he can get a semifinals matchup potentially, get into the top 4 there, which he has the possibility to do, but there's also a chance that he could bow out in the first round or 2. So something to keep an eye on there. Moving on to 157, I think Ryan Deacon's the big favorite from Northwestern, but I think Brady Berge is possibly like the 2nd biggest wild card on that roster there. He was only given the 10 seed at 157 because he doesn't have much experience. So he's going to have to wrestle a lot if he wants to get towards that championship match. But I think he's going to have both an advantage and disadvantage at 157, given that he's been wrestling at 165, so he hasn't seen a lot of these guys this season, at least he has in years past. But he was also used to wrestling bigger guys, which will definitely make an impact there, that coming down to 157 when you don't have to deal with as much strength. And then 165, I like Alex Marinelli, actually, at 165. I know he might not be the most exciting weight at Big Tens. I think it could be the most fluctuating one. There's a lot of guys who have beaten each other at this weight class, similar to 197, which we'll get to later. And I know the co-favorites are obviously going to be Marinelli and Carson Karchla of Ohio State, who's the 1 seed. But I think Alex Marinelli can get his revenge here and use experience to best Karchla. I mean, he's been around for a long time, whereas Karchla's really a younger guy. And then from a Penn State perspective, I think Creighton Edsall just needs to get some points in this one, whether that's an early win or making a little bit of a run in the consolation bracket. Those are points that really could be a difference in as far as a team title race when you're looking at the depth that Iowa has. So I think that's important there. And We'll move on to our last 4 weight classes now, where a lot of people are going to have their eyes on 174, where Carter Strachey is the 1 seed, of course, but he now has Michael Kemmerer on his side of the bracket because he's now the 4 seed because he lost to Mikey Labriola towards the end of the season here. So there's going to be a potential semifinal matchup in the Big Ten tournament of last year's national championship. So that'll be one to watch on. I think Strachey gets it done again, as he has recently. He's been kind of a different animal this year. He's been supremely confident, and he's shown it out there on the mat, why he is the most dominant wrestler at 174. But 184, I think this one is arguably, along with 125, the biggest lock. Really, it's probably most likely going to be Aaron Brooks versus Miles Amin Part 2. I mean, they're 2 of the best wrestlers in all of college, and I think this could be easily the match of the tournament. I'm going to take Aaron Brooks to repeat again. 197. Now this one, I think you have some opinions you want to offer up on this one as well.
Big up Max Dean.
But I'll let you go first, actually, on this one, and then I'll come back to my 197 predictions.
Yeah, I just really Max Dean has been fighting from behind all season. He wasn't really ranked too high in the rankings, but he had a couple upsets, and yeah, I think Max Dean gets it done, man.
Yeah, now he's up to that number 1 seed, but he wasn't actually rewarded in the Big Ten seeding. That was one of the biggest surprises, I'd say.
Yeah, he wasn't.
The seeding is he's actually the 2 seed behind Nebraska's Eric Schultz, but I have actually neither of them winning at 197.
Oh,
I figured I had to take an upset somewhere, so I'm going with Cam Caffey of Michigan State, who's the 3 seed at 197, but he has a win over Max Dean, which is obviously huge there. You have a win over the number 1 guy in the country as far as the internet rankings go. But I think 197 has been the craziest weight class all year across the nation. I think there's definitely going to be a surprise or two that happens in the Big Ten tournament. I mean, pretty much 1 through 10, any of those guys can beat each other just about. So it's going to be a matter of who gets caught and who stays strong and gets the win there. But I think Caffey has some questionable losses on this season. He's lost to the last seed and a guy who doesn't even start. But he also has a win over Max Dean and a number of the other top wrestlers at 197, so I think he's just a guy who can make a run, and this one, like I said, is a toss-up, so I'm taking someone who I know has the ability to beat everyone out there. And then heavyweight, this is another one where it could be fun to watch, but it's pretty much a lock that Gable Stevenson's going to take the win there at heavyweight. But, I mean, this one was really the most important from a seeding standpoint, because it was pretty much, as from a point standpoint, whoever gets the 4 seed is just going to lose to Gable Stevenson in the semifinals, but between that 2 and 3, you have a good shot, I think, getting to the final. So Greg Kirkfleet, luckily for Penn State fans, got the 3 seed, so he's going to have that opportunity to face off with Tony Cassiope if both of them move on in a rematch that he lost earlier in the year. But a lot of people question kind of why he didn't attack the legs a little bit more on Tony Cassiope, who's really a bigger guy than Greg Kirkfleet is, so we'll have to see if he makes an adjustment at Big Tens and gets the win there to face off with what will most likely ultimately be Gable Stevenson in the final there.
Yeah, I think I like Gable Stevenson too. I mean, he's not lost all season, so I don't see him losing again. Or if I'm correct, I don't think he's lost all season.
No, he's probably the front runner for the Hodge.
Carson Karchla has only 1 loss this season, and that was to Shane Griffith, who is at Stanford, so you'll be seeing him in the Big Ten.
Reigning champion right there.
So I like him too. And yeah, I like Nick Sirianni, like you said as well. But I feel like it'll be a close match between Penn State's Drew Hildebert, but I think Sirianni has been best at aim all season. So yeah, I like Caleb Young at 157 because I don't know too much about wrestling, but I do know Iowa's really good. So I'm gonna go with the better team on that one. And Sammy Soso at 149, I'm gonna choose him because I think his name is cool. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I'm gonna go with that for that one.
It's a PA guy right there.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of people, some people have mixed feelings, I guess. Some people, Penn State fans, might root for PA guys, but then there's also a lot of PA guys who opted to leave the state and take their talents elsewhere, such as Sasso.
For our next segment, we're going to head over to the ice, and we're going to talk about some Big Ten men's hockey because their bracket has been released. So we're similar to basketball, we're going to go through and fill out our bracket. And we're going to start at the top. I have Michigan. Michigan's been solid all season. They're one of the front runners to win the Big Ten, so I'm going to choose Michigan over Michigan State.
I think we both have a lot of chalk in our brackets here. I also went with Michigan. They're arguably the most talented team in all the country as far as a roster standpoint when you look at their NHL draft picks that they have there. And then I'll just go down the list here, I think. I got Notre Dame. Wisconsin has had a couple big wins here and there, but all in all, they've been pretty inconsistent. throughout the season, whereas the Irish have really been the opposite. They've been a pretty solid team throughout the year, and I think that I like some consistency when it comes to the sport here, and I think that'll show out on the ice there in Big Ten championships. And then we got Penn State versus Ohio State. Penn State has had some struggles against this team, to say the least. They've lost them 3 times, and then had to go to a shootout with them the other time. And this team just not looking too great. I believe they just coming off a loss against Michigan State, who's the bottom seed in the tournament. There is not a great way to end your season. So I think that Ohio State's going to move on there, which will set up a matchup with them in Minnesota, and then Notre Dame and Michigan on the bottom half of the bracket.
Yeah, I'm similar to you. I'm going to go with Notre Dame too. They've played against Wisconsin 4 times this season, and they've won 3 out of the 4 times. And the most recent one was a win too, so I'm going to go with Notre Dame on that one. Ohio State, Penn State. I'm going with Ohio State, similar to you. This Penn State team's not very good, and they've played them 4 times and lost them all 4 times. And I think Nick Wise is going to be a big player in that game. So yeah, I like Ohio State over Penn State as well.
Yeah, I think this is probably one of the sports where a lot of people are going to have a lot of chalk across the board. It's really top-heavy conference this year. I mean, the best teams are the best teams for a reason. They have a number of NHL draft picks on those rosters there. But, I mean, the people at the bottom, they've won a couple games here and there, so we'll have to see if there is any parity at all whatsoever. But moving on to our quarterfinal matchup here, our semifinal matchup, actually. I have Minnesota versus Ohio State. I think Minnesota wins this one. They're the 1 seed. There's a reason for that. They got a lot of talent on the roster, and Minnesota, all in all, is arguably, you could call them a hockey school. I guess they have good teams year in and year out. Hockey people eat, sleep, and breathe hockey up there, and I think they get it done. And then moving on to the bottom half of the bracket, I got Michigan versus Notre Dame. I really like this Michigan team a lot. I know they've had a little inconsistency at times this season, but the talent is really overwhelming on the roster, and I'll get back to that a little bit later when I talk about our championship matchup here, so I'll stop myself there.
Yeah, I have Minnesota over Ohio State as well. I mean, like you said, Minnesota's up in the cold, got a lot of ice up there. A lot of good hockey players come from that area, so yeah, I have Minnesota over Ohio State, and like you said, I think it's a lot of chalk. I feel like it's just the top 3 teams that are interchangeable, but I feel like Michigan and Notre Dame, I feel like this is going to be a really close one. Both teams are giving each other a tough time this whole season, but I like Michigan as well as another emerging hockey school.
Indeed. Yeah. So we both got the same final here. We got Minnesota versus Michigan. I'll give my opinion first. I have Michigan taking the championship, even though they're not the number 1 seed. I mean, this team was, I guess, projected to win the Big Ten by many coming into the season. And I think people were spot on in that projection because they just have really just a collection of talent that has really never been seen in collegiate hockey before, when you have the largest percentage of the first round of like NHL draft.
Yeah.
On one team there. They had a number of top 10, top 5 picks on that roster there. And I think that it also helps that a lot of these guys are actually playing in the Olympics. So they had some experience playing some of the top competition from around the world, not just some guys who are in college. I mean, given obviously college hockey is very talented, and a lot of the best players will come to college to play before they go to the NHL or other leagues around the world. But I think that experience will matter. There's a lot of guys in this team who played for Canada or the U.S. respectively. So I think that'll shine through, as well as their just overall talent will shine through against Minnesota. I know they've had some close games this season, but I think Michigan gets it done ultimately.
Yeah, I disagree. I think Minnesota's just been the best team all season. And one thing I just pulled up here, Michigan and Minnesota have gone this way. Minnesota has won, Michigan's won, Minnesota won, Michigan won. So the next would be Minnesota would win. So I'm going to go with Minnesota. That, and towards the end of the season, Minnesota's been unstoppable. They beat Wisconsin, Ohio State, Michigan State, Penn State. Had a ton of wins back-to-back. They're on an 8-game win streak, so I think their momentum is just flying high. And if they win that, was that 2 games right there? Yep. So they'll be a 10-game win streak heading into the championship. So I feel like the number 10, even 10, I feel like it's just too many numbers are set up for them to take that dub.
You are right from a numbers standpoint there.
Yeah.
But who knows, with my experience trying to predict tournament outcomes in recent history, especially in my brackets, you never know what's going to happen come postseason. But that's the beauty of it all. That's why people love playoffs and postseason athletics. So I hope everyone's excited as we are for the postseason. But I think that's a about all we have for this episode, our first ever postseason special. So we'll be back with another episode in, I believe, 2 weeks.
Yeah. If you like this podcast, please subscribe to the Collegian YouTube channel. Thank you, and have a good rest of your week.